Welcome to The Digital Patient, where we discuss the latest advancements in digital patient engagement and share stories from the front lines. I'm your host, Alan Sardana, and with me as always is SeamlessMD CEO, Dr. Joshua Liu. Today, we're joined by our very special guest, Sanjay Malaviya. Sanjay Malaviya founded RL Solutions, a Toronto-based patient safety software company in 1997, and served as the president and CEO from 97 to 2019. During his tenure, he transformed RL Solutions from a one-product company born out of a hospital IT department to a leading provider of risk management, patient feedback, claims management, and infection surveillance software to over 2,000 healthcare organizations around the world. Sanjay's continued leadership and vision has been instrumental to the growth of RL Solutions, culminating with an exclusive endorsement from the American Hospital Association for the company's incident management solution, RL6 Risk, as well as 9 out of the top 10 hospitals in the US counting themselves as RL Solutions clients. A graduate of the University of Waterloo, Sanjay has leveraged both his degree in computer engineering as well as his almost decade of experience in a hospital setting to offer a truly unique perspective on healthcare IT. To this day, he continues to be driven by his passion for making healthcare software not only cutting edge, but also intuitive and easy to use for even the most casual user. While guiding the company to more than 15 consecutive years of profitability, Sanjay has never lost focus on the importance of positive employee engagement. In addition to implementing concepts such as unlimited vacation for all staff, Sanjay's leadership has resulted in RL Solutions being named one of the best employers in Canada for many years running. Sanjay is also an active investor and board member of SeamlessMD, and we're so grateful to have Sanjay on the show today. Sanjay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alan, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Sanjay, so excited for you to join us. I actually wanted to start by giving the audience a bit of backstory to how we got connected. And so I'm not sure how much of this you remember, but way back, over 10 years ago, back in 2011, I was in between my second and third year of med school, and I had tried starting another different health tech venture before Seamless, and it didn't quite work out. But I had learned about you from a good friend of mine, Dave Wen, who had interned at RL and had been mentored by you. And I actually, reached out to you to get your feedback on this company idea that was just an idea in a PowerPoint deck at the time. And despite you being an incredibly busy CEO, you took the time to meet with myself and two of my colleagues. You gave us great feedback. That company didn't work out, and then I ended up starting Seamless a couple of years later. We spoke once or twice, I think, on the phone about Seamless, and then in 2019, which I think was probably soon after you exited RL, it's now RLDatix, as probably a lot of folks know. And I guess you probably had a bit more flexibility in your schedule, perhaps, but you took the time to catch up over coffee with me in 2019, began mentoring me, and then ultimately became an investor and board member in Seamless in 2020. So I have a point to all this. So this long intro. Looking back, you were so generous with your time. Whether I had just an idea in a deck or with Seamless later on a more established company. And so, generosity has been a big part, to me at least, of who you are. And I was wondering, are you conscious of that? And if so, why has generosity been such a big part of who you are?
Well, that's a very long question, and you threw a lot of really nice compliments in there, Josh, which I'm very appreciative of, and thank you. But in trying to answer this as honestly as I can, I don't really know if I can look at myself as a generous person. I think those kinds of qualifiers are for other people to judge and determine in terms of how you come across to them, and maybe what's generous to some person is very stingy to another, and that's not really my job to judge. So I just want to throw back a little bit of compliments towards you and David, actually, both of you. I remember a little bit of that time. Would come across as such highly energetic people who bring a lot of energy to a room, and so it makes it easy for anyone, I would assume, on the other side, but especially me, I'll speak for myself, to be engaged and to want to help. So a lot of the credit goes to you guys for, let's say, bringing that side out And I hope I'm not the only person. I'm sure other people have been generous, to your assessment with their time and their energy for you guys, because you put the energy out there. So that's part of it. I think really candidly and honestly, if I'm to be, clear about how this dynamic evolved. And then from my side, I think this might permeate the conversation in general. It's just, I try to treat people the way that I'd want to be treated. So for in your example, I would think, geez, if I was just starting out right now and I got introduced to someone who was maybe just further along in the journey, what would I appreciate and what would I learn from? And I can't always know what every individual needs, because we're all so unique. But at the very least, I can try to think what I might have liked or I might have wanted. And so I do my best to just be that person that I would be appreciative of, and that I would learn from, and perhaps just help me along the way. And I think that's really just the not so short answer to your question, which is, I don't necessarily see myself as generous, but more a reflection of the energy that people like you and David put out there. But then also, I try to be that person that I would like to see if I were in your shoes.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that I've noticed too historically has been the folks that I've admired who've been the most successful in their careers have also been the most generous, not just with their money, but their time. And so it feels like there's some correlation there, where maybe if you're doing good and paying it forward, maybe others do the same for you, or maybe that positive giving attitude just bleeds into other things that you end up doing well. But there's definitely some correlation there.
Yeah. So Sanjay, I do want to talk a little bit about your backstory. And, you've led the most, fascinating and rewarding career, I think, out of almost all the guests we've had on the show today. You built, helmed, and exited RL Solutions, like I mentioned in the bio, one of the most successful healthcare IT companies of the last 20 years. And I think what's fascinating is you had hundreds of employees, 2,000 plus customers before exit, all without raising any external funds. And I think what's the most profound about the story is how you sort of fell into healthcare. If I have it correctly, you were, an intern at a hospital during your final year at University of Waterloo, computer engineering, and you were at St. Mike's in Toronto, and you built basically a program to appease a colleague, for lack of better terms. And that basically led to the genesis of RL Solutions. And as we all know today, healthcare is an incredibly complex system with a ton of moving parts. So I'm really curious to know, 20 years later from the start to the exit, what kept you going?
Well, certainly there's an aspect to the work and to the industry and to just creating tech and being creative that is energy building, keeps us alive. So I want to at least mention that. But again, for me, really, if I look in the mirror and really be honest about it, what kept me going through the toughest times is really just the relationships that we build. So, starts with family and friends, obviously, that give you the support and the encouragement. But then what keeps you going is your team and the people that you work with. And I was so fortunate to have hired incredibly high quality people, and so lucky that I never had to really go out and professionally recruit them. They're just people that I thank my lucky stars just happened to be ships in the night passing and connected, and they became world-class people. I would put the RL team that we had up against just about anything that I've seen, and I'm very confident that there's really no challenge that we wouldn't get behind and take care of. Not necessarily because we had ridiculous credentials, but I think it's just that we were a solid team that constantly had each other's backs. And so as we recruited and built our team, that became really the most important thing. We would take someone who was kind, someone who was, as Josh mentioned, generous, and really just a team player, really genuinely wanted to be part of a great team, over someone who just had raw talent or raw genius, because sometimes that raw genius and raw talent without the desire to be part of a team or take care of your coworkers is kind of dangerous. So we really value that, and then in return, what I got was this energy that you guys are asking about. Is very often when I was done and maybe didn't want to take any more, I would just get myself up saying, I've got to do it for the guys, I've got to do it for the team, I've got to do it for everyone who sacrificed. And that just, it really just keeps you going. And many, many times in company meetings, I know I said this and maybe I didn't say it very politically correctly, but I would say that I care about two groups of people only. Number one was always our team. A close second would be our clients. And then I said, I don't give a rat's ass about anybody else. So that really allowed me to focus on probably the two groups of people that really mattered most for the organization, but also gave me the energy to continue when things inevitably do get tough. You know why you're getting up in the morning, you know who you're working for, and you care about those people and about their values and the results that you're producing. And so you just feel, I almost felt like I never had any choice when things got tough, and when things got great, they felt so good because you did it for the right reasons.
So Sanjay, your comment there about the importance of the team reminds me of this quote by Vinod Khosla, who's now a VC, but he was the founder, I think, of Sun Microsystems. And the quote is, the team you build is the company you build, as opposed to the plan you build is the company you build. So it's all about the team. That seems to really match a lot of your views on the importance of team. I was wondering, when you think back to how you did recruiting and hiring, what were some of the most important traits you look for in team members to know they are the right fit for the RL culture and values? And then how did you assess for those in the process?
Well, this is definitely something that we all struggle with. And I don't think I can give, the, magic answer for this question. For me, what I tried to do, and I want to be a little bit humble about it, is it didn't always work, right? So what I tried to do was do my best to assess character. So just trying to ask questions that are unexpected. And then what am I looking for in the end? Again, I'm not looking, I said it before, I'm not looking for genius or some sort of smart aleck or, quick answer. What I'm looking for is honesty, integrity, someone who's comfortable in their skin, is willing to say, I don't know, is willing to take a hit in an interview, is willing to take a risk by standing behind a view that they may not know is going to be popular or accepted. So, but then how to craft those conversations and situations carefully is some kind of magic dust and timing and things are required to make that happen. I think it's very, very difficult to really get to know someone in, an hour or half an hour. So you do have to guess a little bit. And all I did in interviews was do my best to make my guesses a little bit better, right? So, but at the end is always a guess because we're so complicated. People are so complicated, and what we show 1 hour is very different than what can come the next hour. So I always gave myself and our team, leeway, and we knew by definition we were going to make mistakes. So another thing I found myself saying over the years, especially to the folks that I already talked about and mentioned, who are amazing teammates and people I'd go to battle with in any situation, I would say to them, guys, you guys are the best of the best, which means you're probably right about 70–80% of the time, because being right with human emotions and assessments at 70–80% of the time is world class. But what happens is that we worry so much about the 20–30% of the time where we're making a mistake that we never trust our gut and make a call. And I say, by doing that, you're robbing me of that 70–80% of the time that your gut is probably right. So we want to let ourselves make those mistakes, whether it's in hiring or sometimes in making decisions to part with ways with people. Either way, feel free to make those mistakes, because we're a team, and we'll catch them and we'll correct them. It's hard, it's easy to say in an interview situation, but these things, you're really touching on the real heart of, I think, what makes a company great is the willingness to take these chances, to trust your gut, to trust your team, and then to act on it. And then, always be willing to apologize later, but don't change your decision.
Well, one of the other things that is kind of unconventional about the RL story compared to how people think about building companies in the last 5-10 years is that you never took outside capital, you didn't raise VC financing, and so you funded your growth on just sustainable revenue and profitability. Whereas in the last 5-10 years, VC funding has become a big part of the industry, and a lot of companies haven't worked out that way either. And so I'm curious, like looking back, why was it that you didn't consider, I guess, VC financing, and how do you think about building a company today, knowing that things like VC financing are more common than they used to be probably when you were first starting out?
Well, if you can think back to some of the things I've already said today in terms of just being truthful to your team, having their backs, being willing to make mistakes and step out. These things are very, very difficult to do when one of the partners in the business is really only interested in the profit. Now, the VCs and the private equities, they will speak a good game, and they're not bad people, but they will talk about, they want to support your culture. They will talk about, they want to help you build your team. But at the end of the day, their only reason for existence is to create a return for their investors. So the principle of why they exist is, in my mind, diametrically opposed to the principles of why I was actually building a team. And so my interest wasn't driving profit as quickly as I could. My interest actually wasn't even in changing the world, or, I know these are sensitive things. I hope you don't mind, but I'll say them. My interest even wasn't in making healthcare better or any of those things. My interest was just in having a great team. And I would speak a lot about when you have a great team, you can do anything. But if you're just out to fill a vision or a mission, then you've kind of cut what your team can really do, because that's all you're set up to think about. So I was always on a mission to try to build a great team. And then why? Says I just think that there's no better reason for living. Having a great family, having a great friends, having a great team around you. And it's just a bonus that you can be together and do something that you all feel is productive and useful together. But I didn't limit what that could be. So I think, you guys might ask later about some other special things I talked about. But one of the qualities I talked about in our team is, if we set our mind to it, we could do anything. So let's not pigeonhole ourselves to anything. But while we're doing something, let's make sure we do the best that we can. I didn't make any apologies about that to our clients. And I think over time, our clients really love that. They love the honesty in that statement is, we're doing our absolute best, but, is this what we're going to do our whole lives? Is this, the be all and the end all to life and things that sometimes, companies will say? Absolutely not. And it led us to say really honest things like our competitors are also our friends, because at the end of the day, why would you diss on people who are actually trying to do what you're doing? And if you think you're doing something good and someone else is doing something good, wouldn't you applaud them and say, that's great? So we would like to cooperate with our competitors, invite them into the circle and just say, we're all just trying to do the same thing. So let's try to work together, and we can all win. I used to say there's enough room in the market for all of us. There's no shortage. So we don't need to cut each other down at all. So that all came from having a culture of, real honesty with why we were there, and what made us get up in the morning every day was truly just each other, our relationships with each other, our relationships with our clients, and anyone that we came across was always considered a blessing and never a hardship.
Wow. I really appreciate the honesty in that answer, and I have to say, Sanjay, I'm glad that you ended up not just building canoes with your team, but I'm sure you guys would have been successful at that too. But it is really truly amazing that you did have your focus on something that does happen to impact all these other people as well. So that's really incredible. I'm really curious, if you had not gotten that green light to spin RL Solutions out of St. Mike's, what do you think you would have done instead?
I have really no idea. I think, I can only go back to that time. And I've said this throughout when we would have issues with people on our team. I was like, I can't wait to be an employee of a company again for someone else, because I really enjoyed being a team member at St. Mike's. I loved what I did. I didn't leave St. Mike's because I didn't love it. I really, truly enjoyed every minute. I enjoyed being part of the team. I enjoyed contributing to the team. I enjoyed making lives easier for people around me. So I think, had this opportunity not come up, and it really had to smack me in the face because I wasn't looking for it at all, I think I would have just hopefully had a great career at St. Mike's, and who knows where that would have led. But I wasn't looking to leave. I love the hospital. I love that urban healthcare sort of culture that was there. Everything about working at St. Mike's was amazing, and I remember they called it the Urban Angel. I totally agree with that sentiment, and I felt really proud to be a part of it. So, and I'm really proud that they remained our client all these years. So that's one of the things I'm really most happy about with the RL story.
One of the things that you mentioned, Sanjay, about how the journey with the people was probably the best part of the RL story for you. A lot of it, I think, resonates with myself here at Seamless. So, I mean, I would say there's two things that for me have been the best parts. I mean, one definitely has been the impact on healthcare. I think impacting patients and providers is just truly rewarding for us as a team. But the second thing, to your point, has been the people. Like, one of the things that still blows my mind is the fact that if Seamless didn't exist, I wouldn't have met you or Alan, or we have some folks here who've built some meaningful relationships with each other and friendships that in another dimension would not have existed if this thing called Seamless, was never born. And so it still blows my mind that the journey we're on with such great people is a big part of why we all, get up in the morning and come here and do what we do. And yeah, helping people and patients is wonderful. But if you can't do that with people that you love and you are excited to work with, and it's just not fun. And if it's not fun, like, why are we doing it? So I think sometimes, to your point, people miss out on, they're so obsessed with the mission or some end goal that they don't realize that a lot of the joy in the journey comes from the people. And so, and I really admire like how that's so important to you. And I can tell you, like, I've talked to a number of folks who've like worked it all over the years, folks from executives all the way to, frontline staff. And the biggest thing that people loved was the culture and the people. That was the number one thing that I heard. And actually, one of my favorite things is when I would ask people like, hey, what was like Sanjay's like strategy with RL? And like, you always told me, well, Josh, like, I didn't really worry about strategy. I just focused on like great company culture and being customer centric. And at first I thought, I was like, no, Sanjay just saying that. And then I would ask people who worked at RL, and they're like, no, that's actually the truth. Like, we just focused on like, taking care of customers, taking care of employees, and then just like good stuff would happen when you had those core values. So I have to commend you on that. It was true through and through. And I talked to lots of folks there. That's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Thank you, Josh. That's great. I'm glad that everyone enjoyed their time at RL. I hope they treasure those moments.
Absolutely. Well, on that topic, customer centricity has been a big thing that I've learned from you. It's one of the things where when you're in the boardroom with us, like, you always very often come back to, what's the customer centric thing to do. Could you unpack that a bit more, especially in the context of healthcare, from what you've learned? Like, what does it mean to be customer centric when it comes to hospitals and health systems?
I think I try to keep things simple, and you've already mentioned how complex healthcare is, and there's so many different things that everyone in healthcare has to deal with. And probably the people who deal with the most are the people within the hospitals themselves. They're highly political organizations that have to come together and really to please and take care of their customers, which is essentially us, right? the patients. So for us, we really just tried hard to think of the person that we were dealing with, and everything that they have to deal with on a given day, whether it's kids in school or dealing with families and all their pressures at home, and then having to come to work and kind of deal with even more stressful potentially things, which is patients' families and patients' lives, and then the politics that go behind all that. So last thing we wanted to be was a company that added stress to their lives. So we put them first. We called them by name. We treated them as if they were part of our team, and that extended quite far. That analogy and that concept, and the ones who were amenable to that type of relationship really embraced it. They would think of us as part of their team, and I felt that was the most honest way to go about it. And sometimes that's at odds with mission, vision, values, profits, strategy. And so instead of fighting it, I just made it our strategy. So how many customers can we make our friends? Guess what? That's our strategy. That's our goal. And then we would do our best. And so when you're on a call with someone, anyone at any level of the organization shouldn't be thinking, how can I meet my hours? How can I make sure this is optimized? How can I really, what you're thinking when you're on a phone call or in a meeting with a client is, how can I make this person happy? And sometimes that's, yes, making the software work better or solving a technical problem. And sometimes it's just listening to perhaps whatever's going on in their lives. Sometimes it's taking them out for a coffee. Sometimes it's being available when you're on site to go for a dinner. Whatever you can do was always, or should always be, forefront in your mind. And I think that was, in essence, it eventually became our strategy, if you will. And that's, I think, what I mean by customer-centric. I'm not sure I've used that term as skillfully as you do, Josh, but that's how I can maybe translate it to my world. Is that's what customer-centric would mean to me, is just how do we make our customer, meaning the person, happy? And that's what we would try to do.
That's awesome.
I love that. I've actually heard, Sanjay, stories where if a customer of yours was visiting Toronto, they would either stay at your place or at a colleague's place. How did you ensure that level of trust kind of permeated through the company to really instill this friendship with your customers at every level of the organization?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think for me, to establish trust, you have to earn it and extend it. So we had no issue as a team being the first to be out there to extend that trust, to give that love, and we focused a lot on the joy in doing that was not what we got in return. It was actually in behaving in that manner. So no matter what happened on the other side, you could always go home and feel good about yourself and how you performed and what you tried to do. And sometimes great results happen, priceless, amazing things like what you just alluded to, clients staying over at all of our homes and us being open to that and wanting that. How incredible was that? That was really, really cool. And they would even come to our office and use desks, when they were traveling, not even, on business. If they're on vacation, they just happened to be in Toronto, they would come and, hey, do you guys mind if they use the desk? I gotta get some work done. Well, of course, we would love that. What a I guess, compliment to our team and our culture that our clients trusted us so much. And I think that just came from us doing exactly the same. We would extend that. And it just made us feel good about who we were as a team and who we were as people. And look, I mean, there's not a nice, efficient correlation between the things that I'm saying and profit and success and strategy. And unfortunately, that's why typically run private equity or venture capital organizations don't have a lot of tolerance for this sort of, I guess, strategy, if I can call it that. But my faith and belief in this behavior is that it always leads to good things. So, and that doesn't come from any kind of science or deep thinking. It's I think how we all behave in our families and in our friendships. I feel like if we behaved in our families and our friendships like most companies do in business, we wouldn't have any friends and family. But somehow we think once you go into business, you have to be cutthroat, you have to be goal focused and driven and ambitious. But how many people go home to your family and think, I have to be ambitious, I have to be the best son, I have to be the best parent, I have to be the, I think that that would be very toxic. And so I just brought that sort of thinking to our culture and our team. And look, thankfully it worked out. But all of this is levels of risk, and it could have blown up. And I would have been happy with that, because I know that everything I did would have felt right by who I was as a person. And I would hope that would extend to everyone on our team. And if it didn't work, hey, we're not stupid people. We can go out and do things. This doesn't define who we are. We could always go out and do anything else. That was always the backdrop to why this made sense for us.
The neat thing, Sanjay, is that it feels to me that that perspective and that attitude, counterintuitively for business people, actually is a winning attitude and culture in the healthcare industry. I think, one of the things that I've learned doing this over the years has been that, and then you've taught me this too, like trust is such a huge thing, because, the healthcare industry, it's a big industry, but the number of hospitals and organizations is actually relatively small because they're so big. And as you've taught me, people move all the time. So if you treat your clients well and take great care of them, word spreads. And then if you don't, word also spreads quickly. And so it's counterintuitive as an outsider, but as an insider, it's like, yeah, it actually makes sense that if you treat your clients incredibly well and you extend your great values into how you take care of your customers and you make them successful and happy, it builds trust. And we all know that organizations, want to buy and partner with, solutions and companies that they trust and who their partners and colleagues at other hospitals trust. And so it kind of compounds. But to your point, if you focus on something other than values and culture and taking care of customers, then you end up not actually achieving the goals that you want in healthcare. So it's kind of funny how that actually, I think in many ways, like your personality and culture has been a really great fit for healthcare, even though maybe that wasn't what you were intending. It just actually is a really good fit. And I hope lots of folks actually learn from that. And I know we have, and probably a lot of other companies who are struggling to figure out, like, why can't I build trust? It's like, there's probably some work to be done on the culture and values side to make it fit healthcare. So
yeah, true.
Yeah, I was curious, Sanjay, did any of your colleagues or employees get invited to like a wedding or anything at a customer's? They were throwing a party or anything?
Oh, all the time. All the time.
Okay, cool.
It's fabulous. I know, like I've been out for 3-4 years now, and some of our customers from the Midwest, they brought their friends, their family, and they all came up. I can't remember how many, 10 to 15 of them, and we took them out. This is just last week, and these friendships were genuine. These relationships were real. We didn't put them on for the sake of business. I think when you meet people and you're honest with them, there's no reason to have them end. So the trust is established and it's there. I'm so proud of that fact. And I mean, of course, that kind of stuff happened all the time, and we embraced it and loved it. It was a good result for the types of relationships that we generally tried to build.
Mm-hmm.
We do have to ask you about the really cool office you built in downtown Toronto. So I think when you and I caught up again back in 2019, you invited me to the office, and I don't know how it looks now, but at the time you still had this, you had this like room that was kind of like, looked like a pub almost. and so you had all these like neat things in the office. And I think actually I was reading, there was a Toronto Star or Globe and Mail story on kind of the office and all the neat things you built. Most companies don't have a pub themed room in the office. So what was the origin of that? And like, how did you decide to do that? What was the feedback from employees? Because I think some companies would get worried about like, oh my gosh, we're going to be distracted by this, but that obviously didn't deter the team's focus and success. So how did that come about in terms of the really cool office, and how did that fit into like the overall, I guess, culture of the company?
Oh, these are a lot of good things that I love talking about in this question. So thank you for asking it. So the first thing is it was a pub. It wasn't a pub theme room. It was a pub. So we were very particular about it. We had copper ceilings. We had old Irish. We had a custom built bar. So this was not just, you know, a theme. This was an actual Irish pub. And why did it come about? Our old office was on Peter and King, and we used to go to a couple of the bars there. But as the company grew, you know, we were a great team, we were great friends, and we'd go out and you have 15, 20 people, and people are like, oh, if we can't accommodate you, we can't accommodate. Every once in a while this would happen. And I guess, you know, after a beer, I would just get a little bit more excitable. And I said, you know what, next time we get an office, I'm gonna build our own pub so we don't have to go out to these guys. And I guess I said that one too many times. And so when we moved, because we grew, I sort of lived up to my promise. I said, no, we're going to do it. But I have to tell you, our CFO and our director of HR were like, oh, no, you're not. And so that became an interesting debate. And obviously, they're great people, only looking out for the team and looking out for the company. There's obvious reasons why you don't want to build a pub, you know, one being the liability and the distraction you mentioned and all these things. And I guess my comment back was, well, all you're giving me is problems. I want solutions to these problems. So for the liability, the solution was you have to go get insurance, just like any pub would have to go get insurance. So, okay, then that's a solution. Let's go get the insurance. And then for some of the other things, we put in breathalyzers, we put up signs, we talked about the dangers, did everything we could to make sure people understood. But ultimately, my comment back, Josh, is again, going back to the analogy of family and friends, how good of a friend would I be, you know, if I invited people over to my house and say, oh, you can't go down and have a drink. You can't go down to the pub. You're not allowed to touch that stuff. So then if you're going to have a team where you don't trust them to act responsibly, then you probably made some bad hires. So I would say put the pressure on yourself to hire the caliber of person where you can actually have a pub in the office and feel like it's an asset, because those people probably had a really hard day. And look, what you're doing is you're giving them an outlet and a place where they can go relax and chill. Another thing that came out of having a pub was it was a very sort of cordial environment where people could speak freely. When you're in a meeting room surrounded by, you know, managers and colleagues, there's a little bit of a formality to that. Maybe some people are insecure, maybe some people are trying to show off, maybe some people like to talk more, other people more quiet, and true ideas and true feelings don't come out. You go to a pub, everyone's disarmed. Maybe you start watching the game and, oh my God, I love Juventus. No, I like Manchester, and they're fighting over that. And eventually it's like, hey, what happened at that client the other day? And then you'll say, yeah, that guy was such a jerk. And you'll have honest conversations. I don't care about politically correct. I just care about honest. And so we'll have those honest conversations. And how tremendous is learning? And you would have people in the pub from development. You'd have people in the pub from services. You have people in the pub from finance, all mingling, talking together and being friends. You can't curate that programmatically in an organization as it grows without kind of being overcooked, you know. So you put everybody in a pub and say you're free to be who you want, you know, amazingly magical things started to happen. And then I would say this a lot, you can't just take a pub and plop it into any company and have it be great. I think the pub was a reflection of the culture we already had, which is why it worked. I don't think you can go backwards. Put a pub in to create a culture. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But if you're building a great culture and you're hiring the right people, then putting a pub in to reflect that culture, that's something that can work. And so then it wasn't just a pub, there was also ping pong auditorium. You know, we were really active in ping pong community. We used to have our own tournament that would go on forever, take 3 to 4 months, you know, and crown champion. And it was just a big part of who we were. So these things sort of fell out of just who we were as people. And instead of trying to control that and curate that and put in too many policies and procedures to define what's right and wrong, what I tried to do is let our culture determine what was right and wrong and what we could or couldn't do, and trust our team to do the right thing. You know, every once in a while, I would have to get up at company meetings and say, oh, I have a photo with an empty frame of a guy that's going to be in here, and you don't want to be this guy. This is the guy who's going to be put into the room that used to be called the pub because we had to get rid of the pub because you did something stupid. And your picture is going to go up there and a big sign underneath. This is the reason why we no longer have a pub. You don't want to be that guy. So I would make jokes like that, and I would talk about that at company meetings on a regular basis, just so, especially as we were hiring more and more people, that maybe they didn't have that programming and understanding of how we could do this, to remind everyone of what we had. It was a privilege, it was special, and it was all of our responsibility to behave in a way that allowed us to keep it. And so I think for me, that's why our office was a reflection of who we were as a team, rather than the reverse. And it worked so well because we all embraced it in every way, not just the positives and the things that go into the papers as sort of mythical stories, but also in the sort of challenging ways, which is we don't want to do the stupid things, and we want to make sure we take care of each other. I can't tell you how many times, Josh, I would come into the pub in the evening, and whether it was services people or programmers or anyone, VPs, anyone would be cleaning, would be making sure that everything was right, because we all cared about it, and we all understood that we all had a part in keeping it working the way that we intended. And I loved seeing that because it meant that we were all part of that privilege.
All of that. I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned, and something that you told me about a while back as well. So, you mentioned about wanting a culture where you can have less rules and less policy because you have a culture where people make good judgment. And I know, I think Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, is a very similar sort of term. I think he calls it like no rules rules. And it's something that like I've gravitated towards here as well, because I don't want to have a 20-page policy about every possible thing that could go wrong, because then I feel like we almost are putting handcuffs on people who would have made good judgment and would have done great things, just because of the one person who decides to go off the rails and not have good judgment. I was curious if you could unpack a bit more in terms of like what that meant for RLs, and like I'm sure you had like maybe some basic rules, I guess, but how did you think about like how to effectively minimize like policies and rules that would otherwise have handcuffed, I guess, the success of the company?
I think it was one of those articles you mentioned. I said something and it was quoted in the article, and I'm like, wow, did I say that? Because I really believe that. And
it was an article.
Yeah, I said something elegantly, and I can't remember exactly because I'll butcher it now. But I said that if you manage to your lowest common denominator, then you will have a company of low performers. But if you manage to the people that you desire to have in your company, then you'll have a company of people like that. So our goal was to manage towards the type of people we wanted, which were incredibly responsible, incredibly capable, incredibly loving, incredibly kind. And then if I was all those things, loving, kind, caring, would I want to be disciplined? Would I want to be told what I could or couldn't do? Would I want to be told that I can do this and can't do that, but maybe on 5 p.m. on this day you can do that, but by 3 p.m. you can't do it? No, I wouldn't want any of that. And so why would I treat people like that? So there's just really, in my mind, any rule was a bad rule because it said then we made a bad hire. So I just didn't like rules, because I don't want rules. I just don't want rules. I want the freedom to be able to do what I believe is best for our team and for our customers. And everyone in our organization should be empowered to make those decisions.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do as well. So Sanjay, recently you were actually in the spotlight again, this time for your generous $1.2 million donation that you made to Canada's Olympics and Paralympic medal recipients. And I think 100,000 of that went to the contribution of Next Gen program for future Olympians and Paralympians. And in the article that was quoting you on that, you also shared how playing sports growing up really helped you lead RL Solutions. So again, being a team player, you mentioned this earlier, but I'm curious, why did you feel it was important to support Canada's athletes, and what have you learned over this whole experience?
Oh man, that's one of the biggest honors of my life. I'm still living off the high from that. And actually, just next week, I'm having dinner with the Canadian Olympic Foundation, just as sort of a recap of all that. And I know I'm so proud of our athletes. Frankly, I'm proud of all athletes. I just happen to be Canadian, and so these are my brothers and sisters, if you will. But I'm super proud of all athletes. And I'm super proud of anyone who picks up a racket to play tennis or kicks a soccer ball. And why is that? I guess for me, athletes have to bring it every time, and they need to be their best. So just because Novak Djokovic was ranked #1, it doesn't mean that he's automatically going to win Wimbledon. He still has to go out and beat everybody again, right? To achieve that. And how phenomenal is it that he's able to not only take on the challenges that come with it, and he's got the biggest target in the world on his back. And I don't mean to just single him out. Everyone at that level has a target on their back, because there's millions of people behind them that want to achieve what they have. And all they can do to maintain their position is work hard and be great. Mm-hmm. So if you want that, just be good. Right? The honesty that comes with that is what I admire. And I think that any athlete that gets to certainly Olympic level, but even just collegiate level or any competitive level, knows that you have to be resilient. You have to work hard. You got to stop making excuses, because they only bother you and your success and your growth. Those values, that way of thinking, to me, is very precious in business. Those are the best teammates to work with, because they're not looking for someone to blame, right? They're not looking somewhere else for how they can do better. They're looking inside, and they're looking for, how can I be better? How can I be better for my team? How can I perform better? How can I improve myself? Who doesn't want to work with someone like that? And who wants to work with someone, as soon as something screws up, they're going to point at you for why it's a problem, or invent some bullshit for why it's not their problem. I just have very little tolerance for that. And I love people who want to be accountable. I love people who want to say, I can help to make this better. And I love people who are willing to do the work. And for me, sports taught me that, because I couldn't argue my way out of losing. You're going to lose because you're not good enough, period. So there's some pure honesty to that. And then the character that it builds in someone, if you really try to be great at sports, is phenomenal. I mean, not every athlete has this, but Wimbledon just happened, so it's on my mind. The speech that Djokovic gave after winning was incredibly gracious, and I think that that comes from years of understanding this world and having to be your best and what it takes to get to where he is. Yeah, it's incredible. So for me, the honoring our athletes was really just a no-brainer. It's something that I've always believed in. I think it's a big part of what our culture was. That's why we had our ping pong tournament. Yes, I got my ass kicked most years. Probably the best thing that could have happened to me. I used to think I was so awesome, and I realized I wasn't. So, it's a really fantastic way to sort of get to know everyone and be honest about our skills. I loved everything that it taught us. And the reason that I made the donation is I don't want to take credit for the idea, because there was a gentleman in Australia who had made the donation after the Summer Olympics to the Australian team. And it just made me think, cheapers, who's doing this in Canada? And when I looked into it, nobody was. In fact, nobody ever had. So that's why it was a little bit challenging to get done. And that's why I'm going out to dinner with the Canadian Olympic Foundation team, because they worked really hard to help me make that donation. You'd think giving money away would be easy. It's not. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of trust. And so we had to become great teammates with the Canadian Olympic Foundation, and they really helped us out a lot. And yeah, I'm really proud of that whole experience. Thanks for asking about it. It means a lot to me. And I hope to do it every Olympics. So that's my goal.
That's so cool.
That's awesome. Your comment about like the importance of just bringing it every time and showing up, it kind of reminds me. I remember this story about like Rafael Nadal, where I think he'd played some like Grand Slam match and it was done, and then he went back out and practiced for another like 4 hours right afterwards, and just like the commitment he had to just putting in the work day in day out is the big reason why he's an all-time great. So That's awesome. We're going to get to the Fast Five in a second, but I did want to ask you one more question for Sanjay. So obviously, like, you're an awesome investor and board member in Seamless. What would you say excites you most about Seamless and makes you a believer in the company, the team, and the mission?
I know we've heard a lot of that today. I think, things you've said, Josh, even and Alan, that you've reflected upon are just the qualities that I admire. And I think, irrespective of, what happens financially or business wise, I think you're a group of people that I'm super proud of regardless. So I think just being behind the team for the right reasons has been important to me. And so that's number one. But then, being objective about it and having gone through it myself, I love the field that you're in. I love the clinical expertise that you bring to the table. I love your version of client-centeredness, which is very similar to mine. And I think that it's a great sort of list of ingredients to put in a pot that I think our industry really is thirsty for today. I think you guys are a gem that's growing nicely. And, I wish you every success. I hope you take your time and don't get caught up in some of the traps. Stay true to yourselves. And I feel like no matter what happens, it's going to be a story. Already is, of course, but a much, much bigger, impactful story. And your clients love you. And I think that that's really all we need to do. So I'm really privileged to be in this spot to watch you guys grow and support you in any way that I can.
Oh, thank you, Sanjay. We really appreciate that. And we're so lucky to have you as a supporter and a board member and advisor to help us do things bigger and better for the benefit of healthcare everywhere. So thank you for that. I know we're running a little bit low on time, so maybe Alan, we can segue to the Fast Five lightning round.
Let's do it. So Sanjay, Fast Five is basically 5 questions to get to know you better for our audience. Pretty rapid fire. So first question we have is, what is your favorite book or book you've gifted the most?
Oh, geez, I'm not a very fast person. So, sorry. I actually, I don't read a lot. So I used to joke a lot that my favorite book was, Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. And the truth is I have been reading it a lot for my kids. And, again, maybe to get a little bit too sentimental about it, it is a fun, simple book that shows that life is fun and that you should try new things. And hey, look, I'm sorry I'm not talking about any big business book or self-help book, but I really love Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And I've been reading it to my kids, and I think the story that it tells is a really, really important one, even for adults.
I love that. Question 2, who is a person, dead or alive, who you'd love to meet?
Oh, I'd love to meet Barack Obama. I think he's the best orator of our time. He's such a super intelligent, thoughtful person, kind person who's taken on a lot for his country. So he'd be one. And maybe on the other end of the spectrum, but someone I equally admire is Dave Chappelle.
Sweet.
I love his honesty, and I love the, what I perceive to be a huge amount of intelligence behind his humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, Sanjay, I know both are avid listeners of the podcast, so I think we'll be able to help coordinate that for you.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's great. Question 3, would you rather have super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds?
Cheapers creepers. I don't think I've thought about any of those things. Yeah, well, look, I wouldn't want to have any real superpower. I like to be just like everybody else most of the time. But if I had to pick one of those, it would be being able to read people's minds, just so that I could find as I said earlier, the best way to be kind and supportive for them.
Yeah, that's great. Question 4, what do you believe in healthcare that others might find insane?
Well, I think maybe some of the things we talked about today is that all healthcare really needs is trust and kindness and support. I don't think we need really any magic bullets. So the people who have the ability to solve cancer and some of the bigger ails we have, what they really need is just our support and our friendship. So to me, that's everything we've talked about today. I hopefully people don't find it insane. I hope people take it the same way you guys did today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Question 5, last question. This is a pandemic related question. What is one hobby or activity you've gotten into since the beginning of the pandemic?
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I mentioned Dave Chappelle. I've been watching a lot of stand-up comedy, and I threatened my family that I want to be a stand-up comic, which makes them very horrified. Just a scary proposition, but I really I admire them. The other one is really just golf, and not just playing more golf, but I actually, thankfully I had the privilege to do things like this, but I was able to acquire a golf course that I learned to play golf on. And so I want to learn the actual golf business and get to know how to make that group of people happy and give back to my community.
That's awesome.
That's pretty
So
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Amazing. Well, Sanjay, we've come up to the hour, so being mindful of your time, we want to end it there. But do want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. You've obviously led this absolute fascinating career, and I hope our audience can learn some of the gems that you've kind of sprinkled throughout the conversation. I know I'm taking a lot away from it, so really appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
Oh, thank you, Alan. And you know what? Having this conversation just with you guys makes me even more proud of being part of Seamless in a small way. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Thanks, Sanjay. That's a wrap for this episode of the SeamlessMD podcast, The Digital Patient. Follow us on Twitter at SeamlessMD. And if you like the podcast and want to learn more, visit www.seamless.md. Thanks so much, Sanjay.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Josh. Have a great day.